Okay, it is 6:30 and we're going to call the Castle Hills Special City Council meeting to order and determine if a quorum is present. We do not have Mr. Paul with us, but we do have a supermajority, so we have a quorum. We'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Zamarone, will you lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zamarone. We have one person signed up for citizens to be heard. Ms. Haley, your name and address, please.
My name is Denise Haley. I live at 220 Lundblade, and I wanted to say two things. First, thank you again to the council and the city staff and everyone for the effort and the time you put into helping lead our city in a positive and great direction. And I want to never miss an opportunity to say that to you all. It should go without saying, but I like to say it. It should be said. And the second thing is I'm very excited about the opportunity for our street, Lundblade Lane, to be repaired when the time comes after the resounding approval of Proposition A, when the time comes in November for that election. And I have three things. And I'll see you next week at National Night Out. Thank you for putting that together. Night.
Thank you, Ms. Haley. Next up, we have the consent agenda. Mr. May.
Mayor, I move that we adopt the.
Thank you, Mr. May. Do we have a second? Ms. Daines, thank you so much. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, council. Next up, we have new business, public hearing on amendment to section 50-1 of the zoning ordinance to add definitions of massage establishment, massage therapy, and masseur, and to amend the definition of massage parlor on amendments to section 50-346 concerning use regulations in the G General Business District on amendments to section 50-347 concerning special use permits for certain uses in the G General Business District, and on amendment to add section 50-356 to set out requirements for and restrictions on massage establishments and massage parlors. It is 6:34 and we will open the public hearing. If there is nobody to sign up to speak, we will close the public hearing at 6:34 and proceed on to item 6.2. Discussion and possible action on ordinance number 2022-09-27 based on the recommendation from the Zoning Commission to amend section 50-1 of the zoning ordinance to add definitions of massage establishment, massage therapy, and masseur, and to amend the definition of massage parlor on amendments to section 50-346 concerning use regulations in the G General Business District, on amendments to section 50-347 concerning special use permits for certain uses in the G General Business District, and on an amendment to add section 50-356 to set out requirements for and restrictions on massage establishments and massage parlors. Council, do we have a motion? Mr. May.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance 2022-09-27 as stated.
Thank you, Mr. May. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Isbrin. Do we have some discussion? Mr. Joyce.
Could I impose on staff just to give us a little explanation of what's going on? Perhaps Mr. Schnall could inform us that, please. Thank you. What the big picture is.
Thank you, and gentlemen and lady. This ordinance is a result of a further and deeper examination of what our zoning code did or did not do in regard to massage businesses. At this moment, before Mr. May's motion is voted on, the city's ordinances regulate massage parlors, which are defined in a way that they are automatically sexually oriented businesses, because our current definition says that it's someone who manipulates someone and exposes, got to find the right words, specified anatomical areas. And our ordinance has a definition of what a specified anatomical area is, and it's what you don't show anybody in public. But we don't have any rules about other kinds of massage businesses. It was recognized by a member of the governing body and by staff that there seemed to be more massage businesses in our community, in our small city, recently than ever in the past. And so in examining the reasons behind that, we discovered that in 2019, the city of San Antonio amended its rules and its regulations on massage establishments or massage businesses with a broader definition that would allow them to regulate businesses which perform massage services, but don't necessarily expose specified anatomical areas. And that tightening of the San Antonio regulation is what city staff speculated contributed, if not caused, certainly contributed to the increase of massage businesses in our community. There are probably, I think I counted 3 or 4 of those businesses within about a half a mile strip of Northwest Military, beginning at Sunflower and going up past the shopping center and across from the Baptist church. And there are others in other parts of the city, and I may have undercounted. I think the count that we heard at one meeting was 8 or 9 of those kinds of businesses, which in a city our size and our population seems like a lot of that kind of a business. So we looked at what we could do reasonably to regulate these kinds of businesses. And that resulted in these new definitions, which are in the proposed ordinance 2022-0927. One of the changes is to basically say that a special use permit is required for a massage business or a massage establishment as these terms are defined. A special use permit was always required for a massage parlor because that's one of the requirements under our sexually oriented business ordinances in the zoning code. So a massage parlor as defined had to have a special use permit, but these other massage businesses could open anywhere they wanted in a G district. And I think the staff's concern was we think we should get a better look at these and make sure that they fit our community. And in the process of doing so, what you see on the second page, or excuse me, on the third page of this ordinance are some provisions that apply to massage businesses, massage establishments, and massage parlors. I'll talk about licensing. This is section 5 of the ordinance, which would be section 50-356 of the Code of Ordinance. So the businesses have to have either an establishment or an individual license of a masseur through the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. Their licenses must be prominently displayed. The hours of operation for both a massage establishment and a massage parlor are such that they have to be closed between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. Certainly one of the characteristics of a, for lack of a better word, traditional sexually oriented business like a strip club is they're open late at night and they serve a lot of alcohol. So we have also addressed that concern. There cannot be a direct passageway to any other type of business or to any residence from one of these massage establishments or massage parlors. There's to be an annual inspection by our fire chief for compliance with applicable fire safety regulations. No alcoholic beverages are to be possessed or consumed at either a massage establishment or a massage parlor. There are a few other requirements, and then there's a section that would impose a penalty of a fine for violations of the ordinance. The fine would be a fine not to exceed $500. It would be assessed by our municipal judge after a citation is issued. And each day a violation occurs, is considered a separate offense. Those provisions are typical for misdemeanor offenses in a small general law, type A general law city like Castle Hills. But that is kind of the background and the overview. Mr. Zamaron, who's the staff lead on this, can provide other information if he thinks I haven't covered something, or if you have other questions that I might not be the right person to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Schnall. Just one quick question for either yourself or Mr. Zamaron. With respect to the annual inspections, is there any grandfathering of that, or all of these establishments, whether they're here or have been here or about to be here, everybody has to do the inspection, or is there a grandfathering to that clause?
Everyone has to do the inspection. No grandfathering. Existing uses, and I think this is, a kind of ancillary to your question. The existing massage businesses do not have to meet these prerequisites in order to stay open, but except to the extent that these regulations are going to apply, but they can't be turned down because they didn't get an SUP. That the lack of an SUP is grandfathered. And the ordinance is effective if adopted as presented. Upon adoption by the council, and the city manager is to arrange for publication of the caption in the official newspaper. That's because there is a fine involved, and when there's a penalty, we do need to publish at least the caption. And I think from an administrative standpoint, this should be something that the city might consider, city staff might consider, having some transition period so that citations aren't issued immediately until we can educate these businesses about the requirements. But that's a staff and council decision.
Thanks very much.
Mr. Isbrand?
I'd just like to make a comment that I know this wasn't the most popular item when it was brought forward to begin with in June and sent to the Zoning Commission for consideration. But I want to thank the city staff, Mr. Zamaron, Mr. Rapolli, particularly Mr. Schnall, and the Zoning Commission. I thought they did a very thoughtful and took a very thoughtful and deliberative approach to this. It begins to address the situation that needed to be addressed, and it certainly moves us in the right direction. So I'm very grateful to everyone for the work that they put into this for the betterment of our community.
We have any further comments, council? Mr. Schnall, I do have one quick question. Given that we know by and large how many of these businesses we have, do you think it would be appropriate to let them know directly about the change so that there's not this, they don't have to find out by surprise, or we expect them to read the publication?
I think it would be appropriate for staff to notify them by perhaps just providing a copy of the ordinance and letting them know who the contact person at the city is to, be sure they're in compliance.
Okay, thank you. I just, in my mind, I believe that's a small step that we can take for transparency, and just to make sure that they know what we're now requiring of them. Okay, well, we have a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, council. Next up, we have 6.3, discussion of possible action, ordinance number 2022-09-27-A, amending section 26-121 of the Code of Ordinances to permit the designee of the city manager to notify the owner or agent of any premises within the city which are grown up in weeds higher than 12 inches to remove such weeds within 10 days and to modify notice procedures. Mr. Rapley.
Thank you, Mayor. This is more of a procedural process and changing when we notify any property owner regarding 12 inches. And it's just amending the section to basically allow language that says my designee of the city manager, whether that be our code officer or Mr. Zamaron, that would provide the notice to the person who's in violation. Mr. Zamaron can give you some background if you wanted. And part of this is just making sure we're tweaking and bringing some codes up to date as well. Correct, Ms. Zamaron?
Yes, sir. As a matter of, good evening, council. As a matter of practice, and this has been brought to my attention by members of council and previous councils as well, of perhaps an overhaul of the existing code, which is a little bit of a Herculean task and it requires a full-time assessment of someone actually assigned to that task. So could happen, but it's extremely difficult to do. But I would just like to state that this is actually a civ type mechanism where a citizen or the code officer or myself see a deficiency and we address the deficiency as a matter of administrative tweaking to further streamline the process. This particular issue was brought up by a rather astute citizen, and it will, I'm not going to say empower the code officer, but it's definitely going to delineate the line of responsibility.
Thank you, Mrs. Zimmerman. Mr. May.
I have one question, and that is, many of our citizens, when I walk around, I see that they plant wildflowers. And during certain seasons, I mean, who's going to decide whether it's a weed versus a wildflower? I just want to preserve that, that kind of special thing for neighborhoods. So how would you deal with that?
That's a good point. And I've actually taken someone to court for exactly the same infraction when I was the street code officer. The fact of the matter is that the code does not allow for any type of wildflower or some type of like a grama grass, for instance, that grows rather tall. There is no allowance in the code for that. So since we're not botanists on staff, we cannot make that determination. And even making contact with a citizen who has such a growth in their yard, we still can't allow for that. Even if that citizen is a botanist and says, hey, this is blue grama and it typically grows to 14 inches, well, the code doesn't allow for that. So that's a good point. And I think that allowance is probably overdue. But once again, you kind of start getting into the situation of who is going to be the judge of what is a protected native wild grass or flower versus just a regular run-of-the-mill wheatgrass, which we've all seen in the last few weeks that is actually a weed. So the answer directly to your question is we have no allowance in the code that allows for that. And there's no way of creating, if you will, a niche for that. That's outside of the black and white of the code. It would need to be amended.
I think, Councilman, we can look at a couple cities. I think Chavano has something in place that addresses this, but it's something we can look into.
If I could suggest, there's also another movement afoot, and that is to feed monarchs with their, the type of food that they need to survive the, transition down to Mexico. So, I mean, me personally, whether it's tonight or later, I'd like a little amendment so that we can give a little wiggle room there.
Mr. Snow.
I agree with Mr. May that we need to, when I think of a weed, I do not think of the bluebonnets that I grow in my backyard or the other wildflowers that grow in my backyard. And I guarantee you there have been times, Mr. Zamaron, when they've been higher than 12 inches. You can't see them from the road, but they're there. So I agree that we should either adopt this and then come back in a month or two with an ordinance that has some definitions in it, because I think it would be helpful, I think, to city staff, and I would help clarify the situation. We made it clear that wildflowers aren't weeds.
And again, I think this is just more procedural that tweaks the code that allows my designee to provide a notice in this case, or for this potential violation, correct, Lou?
Well, it would be getting into specifics, and thank you for bringing that up, because it would most definitely, from being on the streets years ago, it would make life a lot easier for the code officer.
Thank you, Mr. May. I think that's a great idea. And I've seen on one occasion, there was somebody that lives on Gladiola that had a sign and said, this is
monarch grass. Yes, sir.
Yes, monarch grass or whatever it said. So maybe that's a consideration as well, so that somebody just doesn't cut their grass and say, oh, well, this is wildflowers. But either way, great thought, Mr. May.
So I have a motion in light of the fact that this is really about designating someone by the city manager and making this a good process. I'm going to move as of tonight that we adopt ordinance number 2022-09-27-A as stated.
Thank you, Mr. May. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Joyce. Thank you. Mr. Schnall, one point of clarification. designee, does that have to be done in a certain way, or as long as Mr. Rapley says, does that suffice?
The best way for that to be done is for Mr. Rapley simply to write something that designates whomever he wants. It doesn't have to be just one person. It can be a job title, is what I would recommend, rather than Mr. Zamaron, but put in Mr. Zamaron's title rather than the gentleman's name, put in the title of the code compliance officer, and just something that's written and maintained by the city secretary would be sufficient.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Any further comments? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, council. Next up, we have announcements by mayor and council members of items of community interest. Mr. Isbrand.
Just want to say thank you as always to the Castle Hills Community Organization for hosting the concert in the Commons on Saturday. The weather was perfect too, so I'm impressed by CHCO's ability to pull it all together, and we'll see you at National Night Out.
Thank you, Mr. Isbrand. Mr. May.
And for those listening out there, just a reminder, on National Night Out, we'll have displays here in the chamber from the Historical Society. We'll also have a table outside.
Thank you, Mr. May. Mr. Joyce.
And the Castle Hills Business Association will also be represented at a table at National Night Out.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce. Ms. Daines. Okay, Ms. Daines, I was hoping that you were going to say something about the trash pickup October 8th. By all means, please.
Okay, we are still organizing on October 8th. Mark your calendar. Saturday morning, we are going to get together and do a citywide beautification trash cleanup. So put it on your calendar. We're going to do some breakfast in the Commons at 8 a.m. And then at 8:30, we will outfit everyone with some trash bags and gloves and maybe some neon colored vests to set about on the streets and pick up all of the garbage.
Thank you, Ms. Daines. And we also have our shredding day, October 8th. So between National Night Out and having the
Parks
Historical
and Projects
Society
meeting that morning too.
and the Parks and Projects. So lots of opportunities to get plugged in, serve your community, and help around. Thank you so much for everything that y'all do. Thank you for being here with us. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. May.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. May. Do we have a second? Ms. Daines, I thought y'all wanted to stay here all night. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned at 6:54. Everybody have a good evening.